Right now, the air temperature is dipping toward minus 40 degrees Celsius. This is the Eurasian steppe. 30,000 years ago, a modern human with no gear would die in hours. So how did Ice Age families, armed with only stone tools, manage to live through 6-month winters that were colder and darker than anything in human memory? Today on the Empire Timeline, here on the Saturated Show, we move inside the smartest winter shelters the Stone Age ever built. The Ice Age. Winter was a crisis defined by more than just cold. The persistent wind chill across the open steppe could drive the felt temperature below minus 60. Daylight was critically limited, reducing the time available for hunting and construction. In vast stretches of the Mammoth steppe, wood was simply non-existent. This meant the primary resources for construction and sustained heat were absent. Failure to secure adequate shelter meant immediate exposure, and a failed hunt meant certain starvation as the body rapidly burned reserves. The environment itself required immense planning. Here's the crucial point. The romantic notion of people huddled in caves is geographically incorrect. Massive corridors of human migration across the Eastern European plains offered no caves whatsoever. Yet, established communities lived there for millennia. If nature provided no walls, and if fuel was non-existent, then the Ice Age family had to turn architecture into survival. Their engineering began with this fundamental need. The most fundamental innovation was realizing that the most stable thermal mass wasn't air, but the earth. While the air might be minus 40 degrees, the ground just 2 meters down remains at a constant temperature, often between 0 and plus 5 degrees Celsius. This led to the creation of the semi-subterranean home. They excavated a circular pit, typically 2 to 3 meters across and up to 2 meters deep. The excavated earth was piled high around the rim, creating an insulating berm that served as a low exterior wall. The roof structure was built over the pit and layered with sod and packed earth. Entry was via a narrow, sometimes covered, entrance tunnel. This was vital. It acted as a cold air trap, forcing on any frigid drafts to move through a chute before hitting the main living space. The moment a family stepped down into their home, they had already moved 20 to 30 degrees closer to survival, achieving this thermal advantage without burning a single piece of precious fuel. Where wood was absent, the strongest building material was the mammoth. Sites like Mezhirek show sophisticated, planned houses built entirely from these remains. Construction began with a shallow pit. Mammoth skulls were used as heavy foundation anchors. Long bones were stacked and interwoven to form the walls. The most spectacular element was the use of tusks. These massive, curved ivory pieces were used as structural arches and beams to create the stable dome of the roof, exploiting their natural form perfectly. Crucially, the bones were often scavenged from natural death sites, places where mammoths had died over time. This reliance on recycling natural junkyards demonstrates resource planning on a massive scale. The finished dwelling was a stubble circular fortress, demonstrating that they transformed a dangerous resource into a source of life and security. Ice Age engineers understood the science of thermal resistance. They built composite walls and roofs using different organic materials, layered strategically, functionally equivalent to modern insulated paneling. The layer facing the occupants was made of fine, soft furs. This created a plush surface designed to trap a stable layer of warm air immediately next to the body, drastically slowing conductive heat loss. This was the thickest layer, composed of packed dried grasses, moss, and plant fibers. These were excellent insulators, preventing air movement. They also acted as a moisture wick, drawing water vapor from the warm interior. The exterior was covered in thick, durable hides or woven mats. This served a protective function to create a draft-proof, wind-resistant shell that blocked the -40 winds. The shelter was, effectively, a gigantic, highly optimized winter jacket. By employing 3 distinct layers, they dramatically slowed the rate of heat loss. Since continuous wood burning was impossible, they pioneered the use of alternative fuels. This included dried animal dung and processed bone, which, when burned, produced a slow, hot, and consistent heat. Instead of one large, inefficient blaze, they used a system of multiple, smaller hearths. A central hearth handled primary warming, while satellite hearths were used for specific work areas. The hearth was lined with stones, bones, or baked clay. These materials acted as a heat sink. They absorbed the intense heat, retained it long after the flames died down, and slowly radiated that warmth back into the shelter. Throughout the night, the controlled heating allowed them to deliberately create microclimates. The warmest zones, closest to the heat sink, were reserved for infants and the elderly. This system was about maximizing the energy return from every fuel source through slow-release heating, a profound understanding of energy efficiency. A perfectly sealed structure becomes a death trap due to smoke inhalation and condensation. Moisture from breath would freeze on the cold shell, turning the insulation into ineffective ice. The solution lay in mastering natural convection, the principle that warm air rises. They designed a system to move air without any mechanical means. They created low, protected intake holes near the ground level for fresh air. At the highest point of the dome, they positioned an outlet, or smoke hole. The height and temperature differential created a constant, low-speed convection current. The warm, smoky air would naturally rise and exit, gently drawing in fresh air from below. The holes were managed with adjustable covers, hide flaps or bone plates, acting like Stone Age ventilation dampers, controlling airflow to manage smoke and humidity. The interior was highly organized, reflecting a pragmatic social structure. The hearth was the central hub. Surrounding it were sleeping platforms, often slightly raised to capitalize on the stratified warm air. Specific corners were dedicated to critical activities, food processing and storage, and a tool-making corner near the light. This organization ensured maximum efficiency during confinement. The design reflected deep social intelligence. The warmest spots were always reserved for the most vulnerable, infants and the elders, whose knowledge was essential for survival. Surviving months of darkness required mental strength. Small figurines, decorated bones, and art provided focal points and mental stimulation. The long winter nights were periods of intense cultural activity, storytelling and transmitting crucial survival skills. The warm shared space facilitated this, ensuring the survival of their culture alongside their bodies. The intense cold, coupled with the frequent presence of permafrost, created the perfect environment for long-term food preservation. The cold itself became the most reliable tool. Families dug deep, narrow storage pits, often near the main shelter. These pits quickly reached sub-zero temperatures. Meat, sometimes entire quarters of bison, was lowered into these natural freezers. The meat was sealed tightly in mats or covered with fat, then buried and capped with stones and frozen earth. This technique preserved the meat for many months. This capability eliminated the need for continuous, high-risk hunting during the worst weather. Stored food meant less energy expended and more time dedicated to maintenance and planning. They leveraged the environment's physics to create a high-capacity food locker, demonstrating a proactive strategy for long-term food security. The complexity of these shelters meant that improvisation was not an option. Building required advanced project management skills and coordinated communal labor. Archaeological studies suggest a small, coordinated team could complete the main structure, erecting the frame, applying layers, in approximately 2 to 3 weeks of focused work. This short window meant all materials had to be pre-collected months in advance, scavenging bones and tusks, collecting and drying massive quantities of grasses and moss for insulation, and tanning large hides. The entire autumn was a frantic race against the advancing frost. A shelter built from organic materials requires constant care. Throughout the winter, families were engaged in ongoing maintenance, patching the hide roof and refreshing insulation. Crucially, the robust frameworks were often reused over multiple winters. This meant the massive initial labor investment yielded returns for years, making the group incrementally more secure. The specific solutions depended on the local environment. Humans adapted their design to whatever resources were available. Coastal groups used whalebone. Mountain groups designed shelters against avalanches. As the Ice Age ended and the climate warmed, forests spread. The extreme necessity for mammoth bone architecture and deep earth pits faded. This highly sophisticated cold climate engineering was largely forgotten by the mainstream of human civilization. Today, engineers and military survivalists are actively studying these techniques. The core principles of thermal advantage, controlled convection, and zero-energy heating remain the most effective methods for low-tech, self-sustaining Arctic shelter. The Ice Age people were the original Arctic engineers. The truth is far more exciting than the myth. When we imagine Ice Age people as scared cave dwellers, we miss the fact that they were cold-climate thermal engineers who mastered convection, insulation, and material science. Reconstructions show that with just a small intermittent fire, the interior could maintain a temperature 20 to 30 degrees Celsius warmer than the outside air, a performance level equal to modern improvised shelters. These structures were a catalyst for human expansion. The ability to survive the harshest northern winters allowed Homo sapiens to spread across Eurasia. Furthermore, the necessary planning and communal effort likely pushed our minds toward more complex cognitive function. They didn't just survive the Ice Age, they engineered their way through it, proving that intelligence is the ultimate tool. You've been watching the Empire Timeline on the Saturated Show. Next time, we leave the Ice Age shelters and go back to the first cities to see what happened when people tried to control not just the weather, but each other.